Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
CanusAlbinus,
Makahlua,
TheMeInTeam,
MegaBearsFan.
So welcome to PolyCast episode 400. What? I know. I'm Makahlua, here with my usual group of co-hosts, CanusAlbinus.
What on earth are we doing?
I don't know. TheMeInTeam.
I congratulate my fellow co-hosts on being maybe 40% of the way there.
And MegaBearsFan.
Hey, that's still less than like 1/10 of the hours I've put into the actual game.
I don't even want to think about the hours I put into some games.
Some of the earlier episodes took much longer than a single hour.
That's true, but even so.
I'm glad Steam wasn't around for the first few Civs, so it wouldn't track how many hours I've spent, because if I look at the hours for 5 and 6, that's bad enough.
I've been tempted to just turn Civ IV on Steam and just let it run while I'm at work or something like that, just to inflate the numbers for it, to make it look kind of like I used to play it a lot.
Nice.
Suddenly you're breaking, why is Civ 4 trending?
I mean, it actually is a fun game. If you haven't played it a lot previously, you probably would enjoy it if you actually played it.
Yeah, well, we're getting slightly ahead in topics on that one.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, our initial topic is, hey, it's episode 400. What are we still doing here? I mean, because at least for me, I can remember being on a Polton, and it's probably, what year was that? 2006. I said that earlier, I think. And I had been in the Diplo games for Alpha Centauri, and I get this PM from this guy, Dan Q. It's like, hey, I'm trying to put together a podcast. Would you like to be a co-host on it? Kind of, I mean, if I went, maybe I could dig up the old PM or something, but, because he had approached me because it was partly because I was one of the few visible women on the website, because this is still back in the day when you got rude comments for saying that you were a girl in the internet, and especially in gaming areas.
Much better now, but still bad.
Yes, it could still be very bad sometimes.
Guy in real life.
Yeah, exactly. That thing, other things. But we did. He also had pulled in Wilder or Locutus, if you run a Polton back in the time. And the first few, we did a couple of test episodes, and I think Dan released part of those at some point, and you can hear how awkward we were. It was so bad, but
These were labeled as the pilot 1, 2, and 3, and they're still on the website.
Okay. It's kind of like with TV shows. The first half dozen episodes are kind of not quite right before they get the flow correct. And it was the same thing with that. The first probably half dozen or maybe a little more episodes were still kind of awkward, but then we kind of got a flow with it and then we started bringing the guest co-host at some point because, I don't know why he decided to do that or not, or if he planned that from the beginning.
I think what it was you and Locutus were gone for 2 episodes right at the very beginning. Not together, but it was just him and Inram together. And with only 2 people, it was a lot more difficult to carry a conversation.
Yeah,
that eventually got to the point where episode 12, there were 12 co-hosts.
And I know for later on, one of the reasons that Dan liked getting the co-host was because it did bring different voices and perspectives. Because there would be things that people would bring up or say that the co-host wouldn't say or wouldn't think of that would add to the conversations and make them a little bit more interesting and varied.
Yeah, and I can't remember if Imran was with us for the first few episodes or that first couple of pilots. It's been so long. Because we were trying to add up the seasons earlier before we started broadcasting and realized it was 16 seasons of 16 years of this, which also in another way is like, what? It's like, it does not feel like I've been doing this long, but actually, yes.
You haven't done any of the editing, though. That probably helps.
That's true. It would probably feel like an eternity if I'd ever had to do much editing. Because I know for Dan, back when he was doing his super high polished production, it's like he spent way too much time doing that.
I wouldn't be surprised if it gave him more than a few gray hairs.
I don't think so. I've met him. He doesn't really have gray hair.
Oh, well, lucky him.
Redhead advantage?
He didn't before he got married. I don't know if he has
I was going to say, between Miley and the baby, he may have some gray hairs now.
Yeah, that might
totally do it. If nothing else does it, that will do it. Me personally, I've had gray hair since high school, so
I was born with gray hair. Like, that's unironically true. But yeah, I would imagine just the sheer fact that it was 16 years ago that he started that that might be enough for some gray hairs on its own, to be fair.
I think that's making me sprout some new gray hairs just thinking about that. Holy crap. This is the internet. Things don't usually last this long.
I think we are the longest running continuous podcast in a gaming situation. We might be the longest for
most.
My
gosh.
So we're like the Simpsons of podcasts, you're saying?
No, we're not.
But hopefully without the quality dip.
We're not that popular either.
It's always funny to think about Imran in the PolyCast history, because technically we were co-hosts together for quite some time, but I think we only appeared on 1 or 2 shows together, like, at all.
Yeah, we got to that point where he was having he had to do real life things, and so Phil kept stepping in, and eventually sort of now Phil's the permanent co-host. It's like, well, okay.
No, I
actually was the permanent co-host alongside Imran, but he just never turned up. Because I replaced somebody else, Carter Mandua, I believe.
Oh, Carter Mandua, yeah. Because she had replaced. We still have Wouter then.
She replaced.
Man, I should have looked at the history of co-hosts.
So, like, I replaced Imran in spirit, but technically I replaced Carter Mandua.
I know it's all on spreadsheets somewhere too.
Carter Mandua replaced K-Mad. Who replaced?
That's who I was. Because I was trying to. Yes, I knew somebody else was in between, and I could not remember her name, and I feel so bad about not remembering K-Mad of all people. It's like
I don't remember K-Mad as a co-host, but I remember K-Mad as a forum poster and player for sure.
Yes,
it wasn't a very long tenure.
No, because that's the thing with a lot of the podcasts is real life gets in the way, no matter what podcast or what topic you're talking about. So the fact that we've had a pretty much continuous run for this long is like, wow.
I think we've all had periods where we were kind of having trouble keeping up. I know I did.
Yeah.
Well, case in point, this whole year.
Yeah. Yeah, for those who are listening to this later, if you ever decide to listen to this again, we have 4 episodes that haven't yet been released to the public in recorded form because real life has been getting in the way real heavy. So, this episode is probably going to be a few weeks delayed. The actual date of recording is April 23rd. So you may not see this until mid-May if we get our stuff together, but
we're working on it.
You got to work on the website too.
But it's also not just personal things. It's also been a series of technical issues too that just make things harder than they need to be.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that last year when Flash was discontinued that it would wreck our website the way it did. So we can't stream live from the website anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, then we lost the music bot.
Yeah, well,
that let us run stuff during the show.
Which makes the post-production and editing way harder than it was for the past couple of years, where we were actually doing it all on the fly in real time. Which, was kind of awkward at the time we were recording, but going back and editing it was so much easier because it was just a matter of cutting out the dead air.
Although I do believe this was pointed out to me just 2 days ago that there is another audio bot that works now. So I may have to investigate that.
Ooh, okay. Well, that's our homework for this week.
Yep.
Weekend has audio. Yay.
Yeah.
As for my tenure with the PolyCast, I first appeared, I believe, on episode 151 as a caller-in. No, 152, because 151 was one of those not another lame ones, clip shows. And I was enthusiastic, and then for some reason I wrote a list of drinking game rules for Dan's, or for Majin's Turncast Live, and that's how I became known here. And then Dan chose me to take it over because apparently I listened to it more than anybody else. Which I believe because for, I want to say 4 years, when I was commuting to college every day for like 2 weeks, or 2 semesters each year, I would listen to podcast back episodes just all the way from 1 to like 150. over and over again because it was exactly the length of an episode was the trip. So I just worked through them like 10 times each.
And Dan was super meticulous about making sure that every episode was edited to be like within a minute or two of, I think it was an hour, right?
It was exactly 1 hour for everything past season 5.
Yeah. Although those recordings, as mentioned earlier, took way more than an hour sometimes.
Yeah.
They were edited down quite extensively.
Well, and that's how Dan always had the video or the audio for so many clip shows, which we just don't do anymore because none of us have time to edit something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really impressive.
Dan was an impressive editor.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see some of his like record keeping stuff because, like I said, he had spreadsheets for everything. He knew what co-hosts were on, what topics were talked about, like just to be able to go back and put together those clip shows, like knowing what bits from which previous recordings did not get into the final episode and could be put into a clip show. Like that just takes a lot of organization.
We did have a few times early in my days as the editor where we had a few topics that were postponed to a further episode. And that happened, I think, 2 or 3 times, but not very frequently. But also, to be fair, when I took over, there wasn't a lot going on anymore. So I think we were just at the end of, or just before. Was it before? It
was around the time of the Gathering Storm expansion, and then there was the New Frontiers.
Okay, so we didn't have nearly as much stuff that wasn't directly related to what was going on. I do remember that every time we had an episode, they released something the week before we released the episode. So the new release of the DLC was the Tuesday after we recorded. I remember
so we
that.
always felt like we were a whole week or 2 behind.
We were always 3 weeks behind, and it was awful.
Correctly, Dan
had a pretty good run of that.
Classic PolyCast things. They always release something like the Tuesday after we recorded on a Saturday, or we'd get to these lulls in between games or in between DLCs where we start to worry, and particularly me, even back in the beginning, oh my god, we're going to run out of things to talk about.
And thankfully we didn't.
Nope, still here, still talking.
So blah, 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 blah. I think I touched on it when Dan had left originally on that last podcast that he was in as the lead co-host, because he's been back as a guest since then. But one of the things that doing the podcast over this whole time has helped me with is it doesn't sound like it to the listeners, but in day-to-day life, I struggle a lot with social anxiety. And it was part dealing with once we started doing a bunch of guest co-hosts and stuff and having to adjust to new people every couple of weeks and things like that, but doing it in a more comfortable environment. So I sort of developed like a skill set to apply in real life when I would have to do things like that. That does not mean in my daily life I do not go around still being kind of awkward. And I love the fact I can do grocery pickups now and I don't have to talk to people to get my groceries. It's great.
Well, that's cool that the podcast served as a little bit of therapy.
Yeah, I am much better dealing with situations and things. It does not mean I still don't have the panic attacks or anxiety attacks, but it's better than it. I mean, I was getting a lot better, and then the past couple of years has happened for everybody, and everybody's stress level is up, so it's a little harder again. But it's still nowhere near where I was in 2006.
Well, with that in mind, it's pretty brave of you to have even accepted the offer to begin with. Because, going on to a podcast and broadcasting to the internet with social anxiety, I bet that was
it was also like
a lot of courage.
Why did you pick me? Kind of, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'll try this once, maybe a couple times. And,
a couple times?
Yeah. It's been 400 times plus at this point. And then when my own co-host to be were as awkward as I was like, okay, it's not just me. Great.
Yeah, 2006 was an awkward time for a lot of people, especially on the internet. YouTube was very new at that point, if it existed at all. I think we were still in Google Video at that time.
Generating media like this would definitely not be something just a common person would have experience with. So unless you're coming from like mainstream sources into a gaming podcast or something, it's unlikely anybody would have significant experience with it.
I know Dan has talked about how when he first started doing PolyCast, it was still telling people what a podcast was as opposed to what your podcast was about.
It was still probably another solid 5 years before most people knew what a podcast was. And you could just say, oh, well, I do one about a gaming thing. They'd be, oh, cool. Back then it's like, a pod what? You talk to people on the internet? What?
Well, now it's kind of full circle because now you tell people you do a podcast and they're like, oh, you mean like one of those YouTube video essay things? And it's like, no.
Not exactly.
No, just audio.
I mean, although us streaming there does blur that a bit.
Yeah, especially since we're on YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, like right now.
Right now.
Oh, yeah, did we tweet?
I did, yes.
Okay.
And given that I can't open Spotify without being, here's some podcasts you should listen to. What do you mean podcasts are old school or something?
Podcasts used to be called the radio of the internet. Now they're kind of actually the radio of the internet.
They literally are. It's just talk radio that you customize for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, people consider it to be lower effort now because everybody expects video podcasts, like face cams and all that
depending
nonsense.
on how you set it up is exactly the same amount of effort. You just have a camera on you.
It's actually less effort because you don't have to edit anything if it's a video essay or a video podcast, because it's really hard to do clean edits when you have a video file. So they just
there's always that jumpy jerkiness on a video.
So they just leave all the crap in. But it's okay because you can see what the people are doing, so it's not like awkward silence.
The other infamous co-host.
Yeah, you just get to awkwardly stare at them while they awkwardly stare back at you.
Well, see, we could start streaming game stuff while doing the podcast.
We've talked about that several times, and it's something I would like to do, but I'm still not healthy enough to put all the stuff in place to have things as snappy as I want them to be. I have so many plans, but I can't do it because I'm not healthy.
And like from just a process standpoint, we'd want to make it easy, hopefully easier, but at least the same as production difficulty right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily impossible, but it might make the show look different or whatever. So
if we were going to do like, well, we should probably not talk about this on the air, but
that's true.
But since we're talking about games, anybody got fun gameplay stories of Civ that we haven't heard before?
Still never won a game of Civ 3.
Most people here have heard the game stories that I've told from Civ 4 till now. I've had some interesting-ish interactions in every iteration since I've joined the panel.
Yeah, and I in the Sistine Chapel incident are infamous, so you know.
You want to hear all that? There's the old episodes of Turncast that Dan put together.
Yes, indeed.
Which you also have to know, Dan didn't used to play MP, but Willow poked him enough to play some games with the two of them online, and then eventually that drew in the rest of the co-hosts and some other Civ players from the forums and stuff. So we used to have a big enough night that we'd have 2 or 3 games of Civ 4 going at once. Yeah. Now Dan is also an MP monster.
Yeah, he plays it even when not on Saturdays now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I still remember that game we had when I came on after being a guest. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you didn't know that it was co-op more, or there was more friendly, not kill each other. Yeah.
Oh no, I knew it was co-op, but we set the AIs to immortal, and like I killed one AI, and like the rest of you killed another AI.
Wasn't that also the game where before you had like a real chance to properly like show what kind of player you were, you right-clicked on somebody and accidentally just auto-declared on them?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
But that's a Civ 4 UI issue. But like, I don't. Yeah, that's not a big deal because nothing comes of it. You can just make peace. But they had that. I'm sure that gave somebody a bit of a jump / scare.
Like, who did you add, Dan?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I was China in that game. It's a long time ago now.
And MegaBearsFan doesn't join us for multiplayer, and I don't think he ever has, have you?
I did like one of the group multiplayer games after recording, like way back when I was still just a guest co-host. I did a few of those, and I don't do much multiplayer in general, in large part because none of the friends that I know that play Civ do a lot of multiplayer, and our schedules after work rarely ever line up to the point where we can actually play a game.
Yeah.
At least not to completion.
You're on the West Coast, and that makes it a little hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody I know is also on the West Coast, but the problem that I have is I live in Las Vegas, which is, a big nighttime city, and big, service tourism industry. So everybody that I know works different schedules. I only know a few people who are on a pretty typical Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. Everyone else is working swing shifts and graveyard shifts and weekends, And so it's really difficult to get people together to play something like Civ or to do like board games and stuff like that, where you actually need the person physically there. So I just never really got into Civ multiplayer the way all of you have. And when I did try playing with the other what was the multiplayer podcast called?
Turncast.
I did get together and play like 1 or 2 games with the Turncast people, and it was just a really uncomfortable, kind of miserable experience for me because I just had no experience doing it and was just having a really, really rough time of it. So,
So you were having the time that Warning You 2 has with us just about every other week, where he's the one with the miserable experience and stuck. Well, he or Ruben is always the one either gets. Steve always gets Barb hit, and Ruben gets stuck in a corner. Seems to be a running thing.
I had stuff like that happen to me where, it was a really difficult start. And on top of that, just playing Civ in multiplayer just has a completely different pace and feel to it than playing in single player. At least, unless maybe you're playing on like deity difficulty level, which I'm not doing in single player, so that doesn't apply. But yeah, it's a lot more stressful. The quicker pace of everything.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the biggest adjustment for anybody doing it is the pace, actually.
Oh yeah,
difficulty-wise, I mean, our weekend games are easier than playing on deity because they don't play on deity and the humans are cooperating, so you rarely get the kind of pressure in terms of like an AI winning or killing you that you would in single player that way. But you don't have the same amount of time in each turn to deliberate on what you would do, playing out micromanagement and whatever. Now, I rarely did that anyway, but for people who really plan turns meticulously, the live format or turn timer based format is a lot more challenging than it would be to do like play by email or more than 24-hour turn timers, so that sort of thing, where you can actually take some time to make decisions on what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually, yeah, there's some of the really great players in Civ 4 actually performed worse in our multiplayer games just because they were not used to the format. Although that wasn't always true. Like Obsolete, for example, was just a monster in our one Turncast game where he turned up. He was a regular deity player, and he did the exact same thing as always in Turncast. So some people could handle the pace, but a lot of people couldn't, or they would still be good, but they wouldn't be as good as a result of it. And it's challenging.
And Civilization is by no means the only game that has that issue. Lots of games that have a single player and a multiplayer component, it's the same deal. Like you play a Call of Duty single player campaign, it's a completely different experience to playing Call of Duty in multiplayer.
Oh yeah, and like stuff like Hearts of Iron. Oh my gosh, like because you can pause and micro all you want against the AI in single player. It is a different world from doing it on a forced time speed, because it's real time with pausing like all the other Paradox games. But that's the one where your Battlefield micro like doesn't just matter a little bit. It's like big component of who wins versus not. I mean, your production and design do too, but like you could have be otherwise very similar in ability and just get absolutely stomped if you can't control your units fast enough in a multiplayer setting. And that just isn't a thing. If you're playing single player, you can lower the speed or pause as much as you want. So yeah, I think it's maybe a little less magnified in Civ compared to some of the other games.
Civ has that weird thing where it's technically turn-based, but in multiplayer it's usually simultaneous turns as well. So
yeah,
it's not actually turn-based, but it's turn-based, so...
Well, it's turn-based, but you don't like take turn. Like it's like you said, simultaneous. But there's still like we still have a turn timer, and everyone is still playing one turn within the scope of that timer. So you can't get ahead simply by giving orders more quickly. It's only if you give orders too slowly that you fall behind, so to speak. There's some double moving shenanigans or whatever that's introduced by having simultaneous turns.
Yeah, especially if you're doing a more competitive multiplayer, that really shows up.
Oh man!
Because people are lurking on the turn timer, like click, 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 trying to make sure their unit moves first.
And I did this to Firefox in one of the games where we fought. You wait until like a couple seconds before the end of the turn, then move your units, and then as soon as the turn rolls, you move them again.
Double moving. Yep. And even when it's the simultaneous and we're doing co-op, sometimes you have so many units to move in a really intense war that it takes that entire turn timer and you still don't get to move somebody you needed to move. And then there's a lot of swearing.
Yeah, I think the newer Civ games are worse about it. Not just because they're 1 unit per tile, but because the way their cycling works. And oh my gosh, in my particular gripe of mine is the input buffering. And we kind of take it for granted when it's good input buffering, because like you don't want to have no buffering at all. But at the same time, like if you have it too long, so it's like buffering unintended actions, or if it's inconsistent where the game will sometimes track an input you put in, like, maybe a second ago, and sometimes it won't, for example. That's really frustrating to work with under a timer, because now like you can give orders and they won't count, and you won't know for sure if they count until later, and that slows you down a lot. Like if you have a 90-second timer and you're losing 15 seconds a turn moving military units because of input buffering issues, now we're talking a substantial percentage of your entire turn. And that adds up quickly. That can easily cost you running out of time when it shouldn't. And yeah, Civ 5 and 6 are both bad with that, with the buffering versus 1 unit per tile issue.
It's not just Civ, though. Elden Ring has that problem, too.
Yeah. Oh, Elden Ring has that problem offline. Yeah, it's not easy to do well, but games do it well. And when they do it well, you don't notice, is the thing.
The number of times I get hit by the enemy and then roll immediately after I recover because the input was buffered because it didn't go through before the attack hit.
Yeah, that's an example of buffering like too far in advance.
Or it's just not reacting fast enough, like latency maybe.
My biggest
I don't really
frustration
think that should be a thing in single player, unless you're like also hitching. Like if you're having a technical problem where your game is like not running properly. But that's not the problem in Elden Ring, because you can have the game very smoothly execute the entire sequence, and like something you pressed way too long ago is still being given in order like after you get hit. That shouldn't be a thing.
The bigger frustration I've been having with Elden Ring is that they because they introduced the jump button, they mapped so much to the triangle button on the PlayStation gamepad, and I'm playing on PS5, so it's also got the motion controls for the gestures.
Oh.
So what frequently happens is I'm running around from a boss or something, or a mob of enemies, and I'm like pressing the triangle button to like switch weapon hands or something, and then it triggers a gesture. And
point
like
down.
My character just falls to the ground in that defeat gesture. And exit from the boss. Like he just gives up in the middle of the fight. Like, oh, thank you very much, From Software.
Okay, that's funny though.
It is comical, especially in hindsight. It's less funny when it's happening.
Yeah, and when you're in the middle of an intense fight, and this is like the 5th time you've tried to defeat that boss, and it does it again, and you're swearing, but
5th time.
It was 2 hits away. No.
Yes, exactly.
What do you mean 5th time? We're on 50th time.
Listen, I was trying to be generous.
That was a fun game.
Well,
Mackie has gotten good.
Get good.
Canus and I beat it.
Yeah, I beat it first, but that was also because I was obsessed with it.
Yeah, I couldn't get home fast enough each time.
Oh well, maybe we should move on to our actual topic, our next topic, so we can, unless anybody else has anything to say about PolyCast or past game glories.
Oh, we could go. We could use up more time than is necessary here.
Just another perfect example of our bi-weekly reminder that yes, we play other games too.
Yep.
Yeah.
My cat is scratching at the door. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but she was being naughty, so I shut her out of the room. And she's never really experienced that before. She's not happy.
Riggedy erect.
Alright, so this was 30 days ago, so wow, quite a while ago, but Soren Johnson had a interview, I guess, with PC Gamer, and he was talking about Civ III's bargaining table, and how the way that it was implemented was a problem. And I don't remember exactly what he was saying about it, but we're talking about the diplomacy screen where you could trade anything from gold to access with other civs to maps of other lands to maps of your own land.
Yeah, I think a big part of his argument was something I've seen from other developers as well, is the concept of optimizing fun out of the game. Now, I'm going to start this by again saying that although I respect Soren a lot as a designer, and we agree on a lot of things, when it comes to AI in particular, he and I don't see eye to eye in terms of my own personal preference as a player. I would like the AI to play relatively optimally within the game rules, and he definitely doesn't like that. And over time, I've come to realize I'm probably in the minority when it comes to that.
Well,
where
he
people
actually addresses that in the interview as well, and he says that yes, most people say they want an AI that plays to win the game, but when you actually program one, players don't like it.
Yeah, see, I don't agree there, but I know I'm in a minority in a lot of ways, statistically, across multiple games. My preferences are atypical, so he might be saying that accurately to most players, and I'm just not most players. That's fair, because you got to design the game for the majority of people who are going to play it, not like statistical outliers or whatever. That being said, there's always a balance there between that and using it as a cop out, because in a lot of cases the design of the mechanic itself is the problem, and that's somewhere where we actually converge a bit more, because you don't want an optimal thing to do that's tedious or that sucks. And a big part of his criticism of the Civ III table was exactly that you would always wanting to be checking and always trying to eke out that last little bit more from the deal every time. And that's not fun to do, and I would agree with that. And so you want to try to avoid creating gameplay incentives / mechanics that are overly tedious in the first place.
One of the things that he brings up in relation to that is the fact that like all of the like tech trading and resource trading and stuff like that you could do in Civ 3 and beyond costs nothing for the player or the AI. So that does create that incentive to, like you said, just every turn go to every AI and offer them whatever you have and see what they'll give you for it. Especially since what they're willing to trade can change from turn to turn.
Yeah, it's like especially in Civ 4, I know this was a thing, but it used to be that you had to have like certain mods that would tell you when somebody had enough on their hands right now, or when somebody was willing to trade something, or things like that, and there would be notifications, and that doesn't seem like fun.
Well, it was better having them than not having them, because then you wouldn't have to do the work of constantly clicking into the screens all the time.
Well, I mean that the system that required them was not good.
Yeah.
Diplomacy has been a problem in Civ since at least Civ III.
I think it's always been a problem in competitive games, because there always is a tug of war between getting the AI to roleplay within the context of the game / lore or whatever, depending if it's a history game or they're trying to be in character or whatever, and them like not throwing the game because they're roleplaying. Because like that's also a problem. It's not talked about much with the AI, because the AI usually struggles to be competitive in the first place. But when you play a multiplayer game and somebody changes the game state because they're not trying, they just do something that throws the game, but like gives somebody in a runaway position, or takes too long, whatever. That's an issue too, and they're certainly not playing optimally from the perspective of trying to get their own win likelihood up, or trying to make sure they win. But they can certainly influence who else wins in a negative way. And that's a problem too. And very frequently in Civ games, the AI inadvertently throws, and that causes a problem. I've seen AIs that on like Immortal expand to 3 cities and give another AI like 15 cities. And all of a sudden, that's an enormous problem, because it's like adding a difficulty level in effect. And I can say that with some confidence, because I've won on Deity, but I wouldn't win on Deity if the AI did that on Deity. So I don't know what the good answer is there, but I would strongly encourage that the optimal decision making isn't something that's unfun to interact with in game terms, no matter what it is. And that also holds true for the Diplo screen. Like making the game inconvenient to play is just not it's not good design in pretty much any game, even outside of Civ.
Yeah, the AI has the time to go through every turn and hit those negotiation tables and even find the 5 gold turn or something. But the human's not going to do that. Even when you're playing in single player, you're not going to sit there and hit that every turn. You might check every few turns. And like the AI one of the examples was about how it looked kind of like the AI was doing a tech cartel back when you could trade techs. But when you're in a cooperative multiplayer game, or even in a regular multiplayer game, you can still do that against the AI too. It's just people got angry at the AI for doing exactly what the players do. It's kind of, they can't win on the development side.
Yeah, because they'll also get angry at the AI for doing things that players wouldn't do because they're like inane or random or problems. Yeah, I don't know a good answer to this there. And eventually, like once making AI better than humans is inexpensive to do, which I don't think is. I think we'll get there eventually. It'll just become more cost effective to implement.
Oh yeah,
then you're gonna have to decide like how to handicap it.
Yeah. At that point, the difficulty will be how to make the AI dumb again.
Yeah, and in what way? Like, because there's been some effort, say, for example, in chess, to make the AI make more human-like decisions, even though it's playing at such a high level. And like, how do you even define that? What's the decision a human would make versus a computer? Sometimes there's a pattern you can discern there, like what a grandmaster would do versus the AI. But a lot of times, like, it's hard to say. Especially if you're not like one of the grandmasters yourself, what would be a human-like move versus an AI move? Like you wouldn't see either as almost anybody in the world other than these top players. So
maybe in the case of risk, it would be something along the lines of a move that has high risk but high reward, as opposed to just the thing that is the safest move to play.
The AI will frequently go for high risk, high reward moves. In fact, the AI in some cases will do that more than a human because because humans have some loss aversion built in, right? Well, most players do. Most people will take, if given an equal opportunity for like something that's like lower risk, lower reward versus higher risk, higher reward, but like the net is the same. The humans will favor the safer thing that's more likely to work. Whereas the AI just doesn't give a crap. If it evaluates the same amount of risk and return benefit, it gets the same number each time. It'll pick between them equally. And so the AI is actually quite likely to take a high risk strategy if the payoff is high. And I would say higher than players. The AI that's why the AI will frequently do non-intuitive things too, if trained in machine learning. One of several reasons. Because a lot of times people just don't consider the tactic the AI finds through brute forcing many iterations. But in a lot of cases, it tolerates risk because it doesn't care.
It has no ego to get wounded if it loses.
Yeah, no, it does not give a crap.
It just chalks up a statistic and moves on to a new game.
Yep. And even that's humanizing it a little too much, so to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly does not care. Does not give a crap. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. I'll have to see how people do, how people design it and how players interact with it as it improves over time. But I definitely agree with Soren on the major takeaway, which you really don't want game mechanics that incentivize tedious play to be optimal. Because people do want to play well on average. Like, not everyone wants to be 100% optimal all the time, but people hate knowing that there's an in-game action they could take that would better their position that they could do, but it's just too much hassle to do it, so they don't do it. So they feel like they're missing out there. That is a pattern we see repeatedly in everything from Civ to even roguelikes like dungeon crawl stuff.
And sports games too.
Yeah. I mean, anywhere it's a thing. Because like if you're trying to train week to week in Madden for your players in a in a season, that's terrible. It's so tedious. But if you don't do it, your players don't get better by as much. And across the season, the improvement is huge. So even there, it's just annoying.
Even just within like a single match, like you'll do things that a real football team wouldn't do because it's strategically unviable. But because of the way that the Madden mechanics work, it's like optimal play in the game.
I'll give an example. I'm not sure what you're going for in terms of the gameplay itself.
Okay, well, at the risk of once again turning this into a Madden podcast, the default quarter length for Madden competitive games is like 5 or 6 minutes, which is compared to the 15-minute long quarter lengths of a real football game. So that doesn't give you a lot of time to do things like establish a running game or have like long methodical field position drives. Like you have to score, and you have to score a touchdown every single drive because you're only going to get like 3 or 4 possessions the entire game. So you never punt the ball. You always go for it on 4th down. And for some players, they think even the optimal play is to kick onside kicks or to go for 2-point conversions every single time because you have so few possessions in which to make up deficits.
Now, to be fair, real NFL teams should go for it on 4th down more than they do. And they've only started doing that in the past 5 years.
Yeah, but
statistically, they are
a situational
quite awful.
thing. 4th and short on the opponent's side of the field, yes. But in Madden,
4th and 5 on your own 35 sometimes.
Oh, I don't know about that, but
in real football, statistically, that is frequently the case where you should still go for it, and teams very rarely will. It depends on the game situation, score, and all that, but there's actually something to be said there, because possessions are finite in real games too. There might be more of them, but there still aren't that many. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I was thinking you were talking more about like inputs where you're manipulating your players every turn pre-snap, or
there's that too, and exploitative plays where there might be a particular passing route that the defense just does not know how to cover, which you can just call every single play and throw to. And in real football, like they'd figure that out after one or two times that you run that play, and they would adjust to it. So, but you can't do that in football because you're dependent on a computerized AI, not a human that's actually able to analyze the situation and make decisions.
Yep, that's what top play revolves around. It's annoying. But yeah, enough of Madden.
Yeah, maybe it's time to talk about older Civ games instead.
Line.
So at this point, we will now look at several previous entries in the Civilization franchise and make arguments for or against playing them now in 2021.
Okay, so it looks like first up is Civ IV still worth buying in 2022 by the thread length is Coffee for Closers, and they're asking if Civ IV is still worth getting. And I would say obviously yes, because I have I have it on Steam now, but nearly all of my playtime is long before Steam in terms of when you could buy the game. So I probably have thousands of hours in Civ 4, and maybe only EU4 has more playtime for me. So yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had there. A lot of the strategies have been figured out, so maybe you wouldn't get as much mileage out of it now as you would when strategies were still new and fresh in the game. But even so, it's I would say still the deepest in terms of micromanagement planning and expansion balance in terms of when you're making settlers, planning cities, and that sort of thing.
And especially if you've got an older system or something, both this and Civ 5 will probably run a lot more smoothly than if you tried to jump in at Civ 6. And you'll and so if later on you pick up the later games in the series, you're still going to get a lot of sort of I want to call it foundational things about Civ down. I mean, it changes from game. Certain things change from game to game, but there's a certain pattern or style to the gameplay that is a Civ thing with the settlers and expanding and what you do. And I mean, districts is an entirely different thing later, but you'll get to know Civ very well so that when you pick up later one, you'll know what you're doing.
But it's like each iteration after 2 has been its unique take on the expansion loop and gameplay loop as well. And I would argue Civ 4 is one of the more complex ones. So in that regard, you are getting a new game that will new in the sense that if you haven't played it much before, yeah, that still holds up today in terms of its depth.
Well, and
also
it's new in
modding.
And in terms of performance, like Mackie said, it is way, way faster than both Civ 6 and 5 on the same machine specs because it's optimized better. And it's also older, so it is less graphical intensity, and it was optimized better for machines at the time than Civ 5 and 6 are optimized for today's machines. So yeah, it should run very well. That's a big advantage for certain.
Yeah, and you're not just getting the game; you're getting this whole big pile of mods that you could completely change. There's complete game conversions and things, and you'll be playing like whole new game multiple times over out of one base game. So really, yeah, worth it still. Rise and Fall was fun, and there's a fantasy conversion I can't think of the name of as well, but
Heaven.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Heaven.
There are several different Fall from Heavens.
And Civ 4 will also feel like a totally different game compared to Civ 5 and Civ 6 because a lot of the fundamental rules changed between Civ 4 and Civ 5. So, for example, you don't have the 1 unit per tile in Civ 4. You'll have stacking armies. And the cities don't automatically defend themselves or have hit points. So you have to remember to actually keep units in your cities so that those early game barbarians don't literally just walk into your capital and prematurely end the game for you.
Yep. Civ 4 also
and there's, of course, the dice rolls of the combat where every combat, a unit lives and a unit dies.
Usually.
Yeah, there's a few exceptions.
You
like
have withdrawal
can
mechanics.
retreat, yeah, and some of the mounted units can retreat. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, the battle will go on until a unit dies, and sometimes that can really be a pain in the ass.
Spearman versus tank.
Although a huge percentage of combat is siege, so
Civ 4 has a, like Mackie said, there is a huge number of mods for it, and very large mod packs as well. Like, not even considering that the original game, Beyond the Sword, came out with like 12 full conversion mods to it that were like scenarios, and a lot of those were updated as the game went on by the fans. So if I'm looking at the Civ 4 customization and creation forum in Civ Fanatics right now. Under mod and project development, there are, I want to say, 7 times 5 different separate subforms for a mod pack. So we're talking what is that? 25, 35 projects that are still active in modding in Civ 4 right now. And these are things like, better AI and Civ Gold, which is every Civ ever on the face of the planet, and it takes a lot of energy to load. Dune Wars, Ancient Europe, Rise and Fall, Caveman to Cosmos, Final Frontier Plus, Star Trek, Total War, all kinds of fun stuff. And then there's also the unaltered gameplay mods that optimize the game and also add special things so that you can more easily see the interface.
Yeah, Bug and Buffy come highly recommended.
And then next up, we have the same question being asked in the Civ V subreddit, posted by user CapitalistPig91 2 months ago, asking, is Civ V worth playing in 2022? And I think my response would be to that would be that Civ V is more worth playing today than it was when it first came out in 2010 or whenever it was, because Civ V's launch was not a pretty launch.
It might have been the ugliest launch of the 2010s.
Oh yeah, and by far
popular games anyway.
And by far the worst launch of any Civ game ever, and that probably includes like Civ Rev and stuff like that as well.
I would argue that Civ V's launch was worse than the SimCity 2013 launch, because at least
I don't know about that.
Well, SimCity 13 at least was playable after a few days worth of controversy and difficulty, whereas if you're going to play multiplayer in Civ 5, it took multiple years before that was playable.
Certainly, we stayed on Civ 4 for a while just because the games would crash or not be finishable in 5.
Yeah, that's something we should have mentioned about Civ 4. If you've got other friends or other people you meet on the forums to play with, the Civ 4 multiplayer is good. Like, Civ 5 is also good now that it's been polished, but yeah, initially the Civ 5 multiplayer was not pretty.
I mean, 4's got permanent alliances and vassal states and whatnot, so you can win together.
Who loves vassal states?
Civ 4,
I've love hate with vassals. I want to see them come back, but in a better form than they were.
I did forget to mention this with Civ 4, but when GameSpy shut down several years ago, Steam's version of Civ 4 was updated to use Steamworks as their multiplayer support. And in the process of doing that, they changed something within the code that causes problems for some of the mods. And the way to solve that is by going to the betas tab in Steam and going to original release version. I believe it's 3.19 is the last version.
Yeah, the last official version of Beyond the Sword.
And can you still do multiplayer with that original version beta, or does that lock you into only being able to play single player?
You could do direct IP, I'm sure, if you're on that beta.
Also, you need to check executive and run in Windows 7 compatibility mode as administrator to make it actually work properly.
But anyway, about Civ 5 specifically, I mean, it's still a really good game with both expansions. In fact, Civ 6, a lot of people criticize Civ 6 for just being Civ 5.5, like a do-over of Civ 5, because they basically at least the vanilla release of Civ 6, because they basically just ported a lot of this Brave New World mechanics over almost verbatim. And in a lot of those cases, as we talked about a few episodes ago, I actually think Civ V Brave New World did those mechanics better. So
yeah,
to some degree, Civ 5, there's still like viable debate as to whether Civ 5 is a better game today than Civ 6 is today.
Civ 5
I would debate so strongly in favor of Civ 6. Not that Civ 5 isn't worth playing, but man, like some of the more nuanced systems of 6 are just make for a better gameplay experience. The biggest one just being the incentives of expansion are completely broken in Civ 5.
Yeah, Civ 5 had the dominant strategy, which, going back to the topic from before, the optimal play of like 4 or 5 cities and tradition policy tree was pretty universally agreed upon as optimal play.
Civilization 5, according to current Steam statistics, still has 25,000 daily players, which is
must be doing something right.
Which is 2,000 less than EU4's current daily players.
And
Civ
even if
6
you're just
is up at 50,000.
And even if you're just playing the game as it is with its expansions, one, I think people have pointed out before that the graphic design has actually aged really well. That's another thing.
Yeah, it has a timeless design.
Yeah, and even just the base game with the expansion still plays really well. And then similar to Civ 4, you don't have quite as extensive of a thing of mods, but you still have a lot of mods you could pick and choose from if you ever got tired of the base game.
I think the fact that Steam uses the Steam, or that Civ 5 uses the Steam Workshop, limits the visibility of mods on Civ Fanatics. Because if I look at Civ Fanatics, I only see, in the that's the wrong one. In the modding subgenres, I only see 9. So this is the game where it started transitioning from the distributed like through Civ Fanatics and other sites like that to going over to Steam Workshop, because it was the first one that was Steam from the beginning. So let me look real quick into the Steam Workshop page for Civ 5 and see just how extensive that is. Because I know Civ 5 had problems with modding because they didn't release the DLL until very late in the development cycle.
Yeah.
Compared to Civ 4, where it was released pretty early. And a lot of people were not happy with that. Let's see, it would be under mod packs, right?
And Civ 6, I think, still has not released the source code, and there's, as far as I know, no plans to do it at all.
It doesn't look like it, no, and that's really disappointing. Yeah, there's multiple thousands of mods in here in the Steam Workshop, so Civ 5 has a lot of mods as well. But my personal opinion is that Civ 5 is the best Civ, mostly because I'm not somebody who believes that bigger is always better. I like the way that Civ 5 kind of recognizes its own limits and doesn't try to push past them so much.
MeInTeam has declared war on CanusAlbinus.
Well, reason, ideological differences.
Well, especially you want in a competitive game to have competition over resources and an anti-expansion mechanic where everyone can get to the optimal number of cities. It really cuts into that a lot.
I didn't say it had everything right, because I really don't like the few cities aspect of Civ 5.
It's such a big deal, though.
It's not fun at all, that part of it. But I like the way that the game's culture and tech progress works. I really like the way that the ideology system works, whereas instead of just, you go up to a certain level of culture and then you pick one, and you're not really forced to make a choice to change into one of them. In Civ 5, you are required to pick one of the 3 paths, and that really has a big effect on your diplomatic path in the future. And it actually more realistically, in my view, well, realistic doesn't really matter, but more, what's the word I'm looking for? More...
It does make the end game in Civ 5 a lot more tense than a lot of the end games in Civ 6, at least in my opinion, have been.
The end game is mostly just, I'm either going to kill everybody or I'm going to drown the planet. And while that may be more accurate to real life, I like the idea that the game ends before that becomes a problem, really. I think if you took Civ 5's culture system and Civ 6's weather system and put them together, that would be a much better game. But I also like Civ 6's expansion system, and I kind of like Civ 5 happiness better, but
just not the global aspect of it.
Well, I do like the global aspect of it. I don't like the local aspect of it, but I'm weird.
I thought Civ 4 had the best expansion constraints by a mile over 5 and 6.
Oh, definitely. Because
and that had local happiness, but it had maintenance instead as your gate for getting big.
Yeah, so you can build as many cities as you wanted. It just got more and more expensive each time. But eventually you could mitigate that to the point where those cities were a net positive.
Yeah, unless you bankrupted yourself early, and then you couldn't.
I was going to point out that Civ 4 does not have the most complex system. It has the most appropriately complex system, because Civ 3's is more complex, but that's a bad thing because you don't know how it works.
The corruption mechanic in Civ 3, yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, I believe that back in the old days, one of the developers that eventually went to work at Firaxis was a forum guy who figured out how corruption worked.
Yeah, that was a really intractable mechanic.
It's bleeding together for me, the Civ 2 versus 3 mechanics. I didn't think it was that complicated, though.
In Civ, well, it was complicated the way that it was calculated. Basically, the way it was you will pick democracy or republic, and you will only pick those because they have the lowest corruption.
And corruption in Civ 3 didn't just, it wasn't a gold thing. It was something that actually prevented those new cities from being productive at all. Like, they would generate no production because they were too corrupt.
Was that the one where specialists overrode that? Or is that am I thinking differently?
I don't think Civ 3 had specialists, but
Civ 3 had specialists. If there was one with specialists, it would have been Civ 3, because I don't think Civ 2 has specialists.
4 had it as well, but yeah. I remember people bypassing some of the issues with corruption and waste by doing specialists.
So while we're on the topic, is Civ 3 worth playing in 2022?
Resounding no. If you can get it to run, it's not worth it.
You're going to go back into the old Civ catalog, stop around 4.
I mean, you can play Civ 2 if you can find it, but...
Well,
yeah, Civ 2 still has its fans, for sure.
They have
if you really want to go back to Civ 1, there's free Civ. So...
Free Civ recently... I forgot to put this on the topic list, but Free Civ actually recently updated to version 3.0, and it's more like Civ 3 now.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. I kind of want to say it's not a good thing.
That would be my gut reaction, too.
Yeah, Free Civ 3.0 has been announced, or has been released. This is directly from their website. I'm not going to read this whole thing. But, yeah, it looks a lot... Like, it has a Civ 3 rule set. So I guess,
if it's optional...
I guess it's optional?
Okay.
I guess they're working on emulating Civ 3 in the program as well, which I guess is pretty cool, but... I do kind of want to go back and play Civ 3 just to see how it worked, but I put off doing it because I just know it's not going to be any fun.
The ultimate turn-cast weekend, we all play Civ 3.
Well, yeah, that was Canus's first thing. If you can get it to work,
Oh, that would make the multiplayer experience even better.
Civ 3 is on Steam.
So yeah, it is on Steam. I'm pretty sure it is.
It should have working multiplayer. Let me check that real quick. Steam's store page should list multiplayer if it's available. Online PvP, online co-op, so it should work. Steam achievements? What? That might be Gal Civ 3.
I was going to say, check that, but what?
Civilization 3 complete. Let's try that. Single player level editor. So, online multiplayer has been suspended as of May 31st, 2014. LAN mode still supported. Okay, so no multiplayer in Civ 3.
Lame.
Well, I'm sure nobody cared to fix it when GameSpy stopped.
It's kind of weird that, like, every game doesn't have a direct IP connection option if you want to use it.
Well...
Yeah. I was really hoping From Software would have patched that into the original Demon's Souls, but no luck.
I can understand why they wouldn't want to do it, because direct IP is really not that great. in terms of actual user friendliness.
That's true, but it's
better
something.
than nothing.
Yeah, and if you're going to be relying on like a game server or something to have it otherwise, it kind of sucks that the game's multiplayer has a shelf life.
They just bet wrong on what multiplayer service to stick with, is what it is.
Well, I imagine that. Well, Steam didn't really exist yet when Civ 3 came out.
At that point,
right?
no. But even later on, well, it was still Steam would have come along while it was still going.
Steam,
somewhere there.
Steam, I want to say
in the Stone Ages before Steam.
I want to say,
but like games with direct IP from the Stone Ages, you can still play, assuming you can get them running otherwise, like in multiplayer.
Steam came out with Half-Life 2, I think.
That sounds correct.
And that was 2004. So that would imply that Steam came around 2004, which would make it understandable why it wouldn't switch over to Steam. Although I think there was a very strong impetus to not touch Civ 3 after Civ 4 came out, because I think even the developers thought it was kind of not as great.
Well, clearly Soren didn't like Civ 3 as much.
He was the developer of it, though, or for part of it.
Well, he was also the developer on 4, though, so he had the double perspective.
Steam launched September 2003.
We should also mention Beyond Earth at some point in this question.
Ah, yes.
Yes, well, which is a whole other thing of, it's still a Civ game as it was, but is it worth buying? Well, somebody's actually interested in playing this, and basically, in a sense, would it be worth buying? Yeah, if you want sci-fi Civ, kind of. I mean, part of the problem, and even we here in the podcast were a little harsh on it when it first came out, because like a lot of people, we were expecting Alpha Centauri 2. We were expecting them to take the gameplay from that and just modernize it and use the Civ backdrop type thing. But they made something that was a bit different, and it's underappreciated, kind of. And even us at the time really didn't. It's one of those things that, as it's gone on and I look back at it, I'm like, actually, that did a lot of things I liked. But but like a lot of people too, blinded by wanting so much for it to be Alpha Centauri 2.
And even especially the expansion pack did a lot of really neat things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it brought the water in, just like the expansion pack for original Alpha Centauri had brought all the water stuff in. And yeah, I mean, there's here recently more than once I have been scrolling past it because it's still in my Steam library, and I'm going, maybe I should give it another chance. Because I've been playing other things like Puraspera, and I guess I'm kind of on a space games kick right now, and it would probably be great because it's not exactly Civ in space, or Civ 5 in space, but it's still a good game. I mean, some people, even in these comments, are still upset. Oh, it's not Alpha Centauri and it sucks. But no, it doesn't.
It couldn't be Alpha Centauri, though, because you can't replace that.
Well, also because Electronic Arts owns the IP
partially
for Alpha Centauri and has been sitting on it for like 20 years and hasn't done anything with it.
Yeah, it's like how I'm never going to have another proper Ultima game again because of EA. Thanks. That's a whole other
thing. It is a significant failing of Beyond Earth that you can't nerf staple people.
that's
fair.
Just you. But but what it didn't have so much back in the day is it does also have mods now that have extended, probably maybe done some of the things the dev would have done if he'd gotten the third expansion pack, which, like with Civ 5, the third expansion pack is what made Civ 5 so just darn good and stand the test of time kind of thing. If Beyond Earth had gotten its third, it probably would be considered higher, but because of where it got stopped in the dev cycle, it's still good, but it's not as good as it could have been. But it's still good. You could still buy it, and it's been on sale multiple times, and you could put a lot of hours in it. Somebody in here has like 680 hours in it.
What?
Yeah, in Beyond Earth.
I'm trying to find it in my Steam library. There it is. Nope, that's Beyond the Sword.
Yeah, there's still a few issues, but even people in this thread are posting like the fixes for it because it's been around a while. So the few issues there are, people know how to fix. Some people want it to be a more aggressive gamer for the AI to be more aggressive, but some people enjoy the smoother gameplay, I guess.
I think the primary issue with Beyond Earth as to why it was it didn't pick up the Alpha Centauri mantle is not necessarily because the characters are different, but because the characters feel very bland. Like each individual Civ leader they have 1 or 2 voice lines total. And even as much of a capitalist as I am, I can only handle Adam Smith so many times before I just want it to stop.
Remember, Canus, no village was ever ruined by trade.
Yeah. It's just like, come on. You could have, like, most of the game's tech things, like, all of them have tech quotes, and most of them are from those leaders. If you wanted to really make those characters feel alive, make those tech quotes be read by those characters. And then all of a sudden, you're hearing their voices more, you're understanding who they are more, and you're not just hearing this disembodied announcer lady who, while she does have a very nice voice, she's not a character in the game. And it's just a disembodied voice telling you about the tech, whereas the characters who wrote about it should be the ones telling you.
I wonder how much of that was not having the voice actors like in the studio available to record all those lines, or how much of it was actually a conscious decision from Firaxis that they don't want those voice actors recording those tech quote lines, because I could easily imagine that they were thinking of having this like open system where you shape the civilization and the leader, through the different affinity paths, and they're like, okay, well, we don't want them reading off lines that are then going to be that are going to characterize them in ways that are now contrary to the way that the players are developing them. But it's hard to know which is the way it was.
I could see that, but at the same time, the text, all the players get the text. So it's not like
right.
Most of the text quotes were not specifically related to affinity activities, unless they were affinity text.
But when they budgeted for all the voice acting recording, they might not have known that at the time. They might have thought it would, who knows?
I don't know. I just think that that was a big oversight, because the reason we didn't care about the factions and the leaders is because we didn't know anything about them. They were just there, and we knew what their name was, and we knew what organization they led. But we didn't really know anything about what they believed, what they wanted to do, what they had done. You had to read the Civilopedia for all that. And while the stuff in the Civilopedia was really interesting, you should be able to see that in the game itself. It shouldn't have to be read to you, or shouldn't have to read it in a game that has voice actors or whatever.
Yeah, because even Alpha Centauri in 1999 had the individual clips for all the different texts with different faction leaders, and even if you didn't read its version of Civilopedia, you still got to know their personalities from the quotes that were given to them and the delivery from some of the voice actors. And then there was also the Great Wonder movies, which also gave you more of an idea of where they stood in terms of things. And I mean, I can see where they probably wanted the players to put more of their own stamp on the leaders they were taking, but if they made more interesting leaders is not the right word, but a stronger characterization of each of the leaders, and they would have had that thing, because there's still, even to this day, people who are the Alpha Centauri players like, yeah, I always play this faction, and it's not necessarily because of their literal in-game bonus, because they like how that faction's thought process and culture was.
The Alpha Centauri factions are much more distinct individually than the Beyond Earth ones, definitely.
And the mainline Civ games can get away with having a little less characterization for the civilization leaders because of the fact that they are actual historic figures. So if you know anything about history, you're probably going to have a basic gist of maybe who these people were and what they might have done. Like, pretty much anybody is going to know who a Julius Caesar is, or, most of us are probably going to have some idea of who Montezuma was, or Gandhi. So you don't need to have as strong a characterization of them in the game, because the players come in with their own preconceptions of who these historic figures were and what they did, unlike the sci-fi setting where they're completely original made-up characters and just basically appear to the players as blank slates.
The communiques in the expansion did a lot to help that, but not enough, and it was too late to affect the way that the public thought about it, I think.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because I think of what would have happened if Civ V and Civ VI had not seen a second expansion because of negative reactions to the vanilla game. Like, if we would have not gotten Brave New World for Civ V with the trade mechanics and the Great Works mechanics and stuff like that, looks like they're going to be carried forward into probably many future Civ titles. And then similarly with Civ 6, with all the climate change stuff and the disasters things, which, probably some of that will make it into future titles as well. What did we miss out by not getting a second expansion to Beyond Earth?
Yeah.
It is possible that they were never planning a second expansion, but...
It could be possible they weren't even planning a first expansion, but the game sold just well enough that they did it anyway.
It really needed a second expansion to be as good as Civ V.
Yeah, I agree.
The art and the music in Beyond Earth are phenomenal.
It's true. It was always very pretty, that music, yeah. All the hours I didn't play it, I did enjoy that part of it so much.
The mood when you are first settling and the whole world is strange and there's creatures out there everywhere, that has a very different feeling to me than the beginning of a Civ game, like a historical Civ game. And I'm not quite sure why, but it was playing that in Beyond Earth felt very different. I guess maybe because you knew it was a different planet and some of the time you were on a fungal world that just looked really funky.
And there's also a vibe to when you're getting close to the end game and the music's changing, you're starting to build these super advanced tech units, and you're either doing something like when you're setting up the portal because you're going to go back to Earth and you have all these units lined up around the portal and you're just waiting before you go through and things like that. And there's a great feel to that.
Assuming there was any degree of tech parity. And so you're actually getting, competition from the AIs. Because one of the big problems with Beyond Earth was because the tech tree was non-linear, it was much harder for the game to delineate clear early game, mid-game, late game stages, because players could be in all sorts of different places on the tech tree. And, it was quite common in that game for one player to actually be in the end game, like potentially researching victory technologies and stuff like that, and everyone else is like still kind of just entering the mid game.
There did kind of need to be a level of skill parity for it to work the way it should, but I definitely think it was a good game.
Because the best of the best in Civ 4 could have tanks by 1100 AD, and that was even faster than DAI, despite that Civ 4 has the largest bonuses given to the AI by a margin.
Well, and it's not even just a matter of having the most techs. It's also an issue of just being able to gauge where the other players are, because you can't look at the other players' tech trees to see what they've researched and how far along they are. Now, maybe if Beyond Earth had more of like the graphical stuff that Civ 6 has, where more of the infrastructure is like on the map, you would get a better feel for how advanced the other, Civs were. But as it stands now, like it's really hard to tell, well, how do I compare to these other Civs because of the fact that the tech tree is non-linear and the units go off in completely different directions and all that stuff. Like,
it's been so long since I played now, but I had some impression of that while I was playing, and now I don't remember how I got that impression.
A lot of the things that you built in high tech did appear on the map, like the important game-winning things were on the map.
Right.
And the unit quality was a big tell as well.
Yeah, which units the enemy had and what their what upgrades they had taken. I believe they were different based on which you chose.
Yeah, I mean, Purity, Harmony, and Supremacy all had different stuff, but they also within those three had progressions, and what your opponent is fielding within those progressions would give you some idea of where they are as well.
Yeah, but there was also the difference between like kind of going for more advanced techs, but remember Beyond Earth also had the thing where you can like dive deeper into the earlier techs. So you could also have civs that were really fully developing all of the lower level techs as opposed to going immediately for the later level techs. And that's also something where it's like, how do you compare, relative strength or closeness to victory,
Yeah, I don't know. You have some tells in all the games. I don't think Beyond Earth was that much less than like Civ 6, because you can't just like go into a Civ 6 AI's tech tree and see where they are either. You can infer based on things you observe on the map, but that was true in Beyond Earth as well.
The Civ 6 tech tree and Civic tree also have those little icons on the scroll bar that show you what era of technology each civilization is in.
Yeah, I guess.
So you can see that, and then in Civ 4, like, you had the outright tech trading where you could literally just go to the trade screen and see if that other Civ has any technologies that you don't. And then both Civ 5 and Civ 6 also have the trade routes have the tech bleeding stuff, where if you send a trade route, you get a number of beakers that are equal to however many technologies the other Civ has that you don't have. So that also gives you a gauge of the other Civ potentially being more advanced, while also providing a little bit of a dynamic catch-up, sort of rubber banding mechanic that lets those lower level civs catch up in a way that doesn't feel like explicit cheating rubber banding, but something that's like within the game rules and that makes logical sense.
Yeah, since they don't have to let you trade with them.
Well, for trade routes, they kind of do, unless they declare war on you to end the trade routes.
Yeah, but that's an option. And if you're way behind them on tech, what are you going to say if they declare war on you to prevent you from trading with them? What are you going to do about it? You going to go there and stop it?
Well, you're just going to field some spearmen to kill all their tanks, and it'll be fine.
Yes.
Yeah, good luck with that. Especially in the era of Civ where hit points are a thing. Good luck with that.
Oh boy.
Ah, yes. Now you're reminding me of another ish moment in one of the Civ 6 games.
Oh boy.
Where Reuben attacked me.
Yeah, but he didn't know what was going on yet.
It was funny, though.
Yes, it was. All right, are we out of topics? I think we're out of topics.
Yeah, I think we have one that we're going to postpone so we can do proper justice to the depth implied.
Pretty big topic.
So that will take us to the end. So thank you, everyone listening, for joining us as we reach 40% of our journey to 1,000 episodes.
Oh, no.
As always, it's been the MeInTeam, and joining me today were CanusAlbinus.
Can we not say we're going to 1,000? Can we just get there organically?
I'll show you organically. Makahlua.
I think that counts as harmony if you're going to show him organically. Also, play old Civ games. They're still cool.
And MegaBearsFan.
Let's start with episode 401 before we start talking about episode 1000.
Maybe if we go to a weekly format. Ha ha ha, not going to happen.
No.
Supremacy all the way.
So thank you to everybody who has listened to us for all these years. Hopefully we'll keep going. I don't see us stopping anytime soon. Maybe we will move to a more monthly format until there's another game announcement if we run out of topics. But thus far, we don't seem to be running out of topics, so all's fair in love and war. Is that the right thing to say?
All's fair in love and Civ?
That makes better sense. Hey, that'll be our topic, or that'll be our episode title.
Quote, now bend over, -CanusAlbinus.
No. That's the MeInTeam.
Perhaps.
I'm pretty sure that we've already had an episode with that title, but it doesn't matter because it was at least 100 episodes ago, so nobody will notice. It's not
I don't think we've had Now Bend Over as an episode title.
It's not like the title of the episode is the actual private key, or what's the name? Shoot, I'm showing my lack of use of primary key. That's it. All right. Civilization 3, 4, 5, Beyond Earth, and 6 sound clips. Copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright the PolyCast at thepolycast.net.